Dungeons & Dragons Origin Story: The Peacetaker. The sun was beginning to rise over the forest clearing, the sounds of birds and running water filling the air. Forest animals scattered in response to the sounds of crunching leaves beneath subtle footsteps as a large, hooded figure stepped out from the trees into the clearing. Hands covered in white and gray wrappings reached up to remove the hood, exposing the man's face to the morning sun. His features were sharp yet broad, bearing scars crisscrossing his cheekbones. His gray skin and size marked him for an orc, though his hair and build resembled that of a human. Kaishem Na Shardul was half-orc, half-human, an uncommon heritage for the orc tribes near the spine of the world he had been born to, where tradition and isolation were still the norm. He paused to fill his lungs with the fresh mountain air, his flint-colored eyes taking in the scene. Vines had begun wrapping themselves around the statues of the goddess Myliki, while grass sprouted around planks of broken wood and half-burned timbers. A mere 3 seasons had come and gone since the monastery was ransacked and burned, but the earth had already begun to reclaim the old temple complex. Na Shardul approached a stone walkway, following it until he reached a fountain dedicated to the goddess Eldath, known as the Mother Guardian of Groves to some, or the Mother of the Waters to others. Here he recalled many lessons he had received at this spot, back when he had been known by a different name. One lesson in particular stood out in his mind on a day when he had gotten into a fight with another monkling staying at the Order of the Dai monastery. This had been his first spring living amongst the monks who had taken him in, and as such, he still acted like he had grown up in his homeland on the borders of the Many Arrows Kingdom, high in the mountains. Those high mountains were a hard place, but the orcs of his tribe were harder still. He was given the name Feng Sarak, meaning unyielding in the orc tongue, and took his mother's surname Ghel. Feng knew from an early age that he was different from other orcs. He grew much more slowly, and his skin was soft and easily bruised when compared to the other orclings. His presence was usually met with whisperings and rumors about his father. Some said his mother had used a charm from an orc shaman on a soldier she had encountered living in the south, while others said that she had worked as an exotic attraction at a human brothel in Waterdeep. Those accusations enraged him, but his mother never spoke of his father and Feng never asked. He was the only half-blood in his clan and was often tormented by the other orcs. The orcs on the borders of the Many Arrows Kingdom had a predominantly warrior culture, where feuds between clans were frequent. All young orcs learned to fight their peers to get noticed by clan chiefs, and as the only half-blood in the clan, he was an easy target for those who wished to demonstrate their natural abilities and strength. His relatively underdeveloped body and softer skin left him vulnerable to bites and gashes from his peers. Because of this, Feng learned to be vigilant at an early age and to meet any challengers with ferocity. This was the way he had learned to survive before his mother decided he may have a better life growing up amongst humans. So on that spring day, when his fellow monkling had described him as an impure monster who defiled the sacred monastery's grounds, he had beaten the kid so badly that he was on bed rest for several weeks. This was the day when monk Kaishem Jaito, Kaishem being a title all the monks took upon them, walked with him to the shrine near the goddess Eldath's fountain. "You've made quite a ruckus today, haven't you, Feng? Nearly gave a heart attack to half the older monks," he chuckled. Feng continued walking in silence. Jaito continued in a more somber tone. "I'm sure you're aware you could have killed that boy today." Feng responded by bowing his head in shame. "The shame you feel is important. It means you know that what you did was wrong, that you have a good heart. I can imagine this is the first time you've realized how strong you are, and how much damage you can inflict on others when you act with unrestrained emotion. This is why the Dai taught us that emotion is like a fire. Although it can keep us warm, it can burn others, and it can even destroy us. There are those who study the ways of the Dai and interpret his teachings about the forces of nature as justification for spell casting and destruction. But we believe the deeper meaning in his teachings was about how these natural forces work together to sustain life. Some see destruction in the elements. We see harmony in life. That is why we follow the Dai, the first precept being the sanctity of life, and the second an oath of non-violence. From henceforth I shall name you Kaishem Na Shardul, meaning giver of peace. Yes, this fountain was especially significant for him. This is where he had relinquished his old name, leaving behind his old life and adopting the Dai's 8 precepts. He grew to love these teachings and the peace they brought him. He truly believed practicing living them would bring him long-term happiness and peace. Shardul continued walking past the fountain up the steps towards the shrine. The floor of the shrine was a large, square stone platform made of octagonal tiles representing the 8 precepts. In each corner of the platform stood a large flat cylinder, one for each of the 4 elements. The remains of a now burned wooden structure lay strewn about the platform, but a few of the surrounding trees still remained. At the center of the platform stood the statue of Sylvanus, the Old Father, now smashed, standing over an overgrown patch of grass normally kept as a place to sit for meditation. The night the monastery had been destroyed had been like any other. Shardul had finished lighting the candles near the shrine so he could complete some repairs to the aged wooden pillars. There had been reports of goblin thieves raiding some of the northern temples here in the Westwood Forest. These thieves would steal the rubies and gold from sacred tokens and statues to be either sold or incorporated into their own religious sites. In general, the oaths of non-violence made the monasteries easy targets, but in a way also protected the monks from violent attacks, even from goblins, it being common knowledge there wouldn't be any retaliation. Still, he felt troubled by the rumors. Jaito had reassured him that the 8 precepts keep us safe. Our oath of non-violence bring the grace and blessings of our mother Eldath upon us, as promised by Kaishem Dai. So monastic life continued as usual, and this night was no exception. As the candles grew dim, Shardul began to doze off. Suddenly, he awoke to the sounds of frantic voices from within the monastery. Then a low drone sounded that he thought he would never hear again, an orc raider war horn. Shardul knew the monks were in trouble, as their oaths of non-violence would do little to dissuade the orcs' thirst for violence and quest to obtain resources. As he ran down the stairs past the fountain and through the main living quarters, his carpentry tools at his belt, he saw that multiple fires had already been lit, the ground littered with the still robed bodies of his fellow monks. He rushed to Jaito's living quarters, bursting through the screen door to find an orc warrior standing over the bowing form of his friend and mentor. Jaito began reciting the oath of non-violence, never lifting his head as he added, "Feng Na Shardul, this is my last lesson for you. Just as the fire transforms water to air, but cannot destroy it, neither can violence destroy the body, as the spirit will live on in the earth, sky, and air. Remember the Dai's 8 precepts. Remember your oath." And then, like a candle in the wind, his life was snuffed out. Shock and disbelief flooded Feng first, before he was overcome by a cold rage. As the orc warrior turned towards him, Feng struck with all his might. The warrior, not expecting any retaliation this night, was taken off guard, tripping and falling backwards. Feng leaped on top of the invader and in his rage struck the warrior with the metal hatchet from his carpentry kit. The room lay still as Feng realized what he had done. He had broken his oath. He had defiled the monastery. Feng later learned the orc raiders were from a faction that had come down from deep within the Sword Mountains. They killed every monk that night, stripped the gold and gems off of sacred statues, and raided the pantries of the alms for food and supplies. Feng fled, his shame at having not died faithful and true to his oaths like his brothers driving him from the monastery. For a time, he wandered south, reaching the town of Waterdeep. Here he slept under bridges and near garbage heaps during the day, searching and sometimes stealing food at night. As the weeks went by, his sense of shame faded to loss and emptiness. His entire world had been taken from him in one night, and with it, his faith. The precepts had not protected Jaito and his other friends that night. The grace of the mother Eldath had not shone upon them. As the months went by, Feng made his way back into the forests and mountains, scouring the old temples and shrines for meaning. While searching through ruins of a particular temple, Feng discovered texts from monks outside his tradition, those which spoke of harnessing one's own inner power, one's ki, to harness the elements, utilize weapons, and even travel through shadows unnoticed. These texts pronounced the sacred duty of warrior monks to protect the innocent and the sacred. As Feng studied these texts further, he stumbled upon his own monk-given name, as well as its meaning. While it is true that Na Shardul can be interpreted as giver of peace, where dul means peace in the old tongue, Shar can mean both to give or to remove. Or in other words, Kaishem Na Shardul. Kaishem, the peace taker.